Yeah, I'm Lisa. I am a master's graduate in media and cultural studies, and I'm a future PhD candidate at the University of Sunderland, and I'll be specialising in video games, hopefully. As you can probably tell, I'm currently in my classroom at work. I'm currently working as a maths teacher, which is why I have such a late slot. So thank you all for being here. I'm sorry I've missed all the talks previously. I'm sure they were great. But yeah, so my research focuses on non-media centric media studies in relation to video games. I focus on phenomenological geographers such as David Seaman and Heidegger, who look at space and place. And the key theory that I'm going to talk about today is dwelling and at-homeness. But first off, I just want to give you a bit of a background in constructing place in game spaces. So I propose that video games can construct place in a number of different levels of gameplay. So first off, we have like the games companies themselves. So these are the main like manufacturers of games like Nintendo and PlayStation, but also like the key developers like Naughty Dog, Bethesda, Activision, things like that, who create the games themselves. So players create connections to these specific brands and companies. Next to this, we also have like the physical console that's being played. So your Nintendo Switch, your Game Boy Advance, your PlayStation 2, 3, 4, 5, and your Xboxes. Players can create connections to these consoles, both like the physical like hardware of the console, so the controllers, the actual device, and the software, so yeah, your welcome screen and things like that. We also have like game franchises, so these are like series of games, so your Total Mass Effect series, all of the Animal Crossing games, your Halos, your Call of Duties, so game franchises where players can create connections to multiple games set in the same world, so you create connections to these worlds. And then on a slightly lower level, we have like the individual games themselves. So the few examples that I've put here are games that mean a lot to me. So things like The Last of Us Part 2, The Simpsons Hit and Run, which is in my opinion the best game ever made, and Animal Crossing Wild World. You can create connections to these specific games, even if they're not part of a wider franchise. You get really connected to these characters and the worlds that they're set in. I do also think that where games are played does have an effect on this, and when games are played. But today I am going to be focusing on the games themselves. But it's important to note that these levels aren't independent of each other. They do interact with each other and exist in kind of a flow. So even though I'm focusing on games themselves, and particularly one specific game, hopefully you'll be able to see how these features do interact and affect each other. So the key case study, oh, then no, we're not getting to that bit, sorry. So one of the key theories, and the first theorist I'm going to look at today is Desertio, and he says that every story is a travel story. So by exploring a space, you create a story. And I think that this is true for video games especially. So Desertio was writing about physical spaces. So by traveling through a city, you explore the city, you create stories within that city. Also by reading a book or watching a film. In the books or films, you explore the space in which the story is set. And by exploring that space, you advance the story. And this is especially true in games because not only are we observers, but we manipulate the games. We change things in the games, and those actions advance the story. Some games you might just step into a room, and then that's completely triggered a whole new part of the game. You completely change the story to what it was a few seconds ago. So you have a much more of an active role within the game compared to things like books and films. And this action contributes to the creation of place from a previously unknown space. So when I talk about these two things, place is something that typically you have connections to, you have relationships with. Space is something that's a little bit unknown. That's not to say that one's better than the other. It's just dependent on the relationship which we have on those. But yeah, so basically my point for this slide is to say that to play the game, to inhabit the space, you have to live in it. And that theory of inhabiting is quite important, and I'll come back to it. But first off, I just want to discuss my key case study for today and in my previous research, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons. So a bit of background on Animal Crossing. New Horizons was released in 2020, and it's the 5th instalment of the series created by Nintendo. On this game, players have signed up to the Nook Inc. Deserted Island Getaway package, and so they're sent off to a deserted island which they can live on and reside on. The first person to play it, so the first designated player, is seen as the island representative, and they have the most control and influence throughout the game, and the main story narrative progression through the game. Other players do have similar features, just not quite as in-depth as the main player. One of the key features of New Horizons, and what makes it special and stand out from other games in the series, is that players have extra customization features. So players can terraform. So this is by adding, you can add and remove lakes and rivers on your island. You can construct and destruct cliffs. So you really have a lot of control on how you build your island. Not only this, but players can kind of pick and choose who lives on their island. So they can choose, with some constraints, 10 villagers who lives on their island with them. These are villagers like this guy here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's the little cat guy in the bottom corner. He's a villager that can come and live on your island, and they're different from non-player characters like these other three. They either live on the island permanently and have roles, or they are visiting NPCs. An important part of Animal Crossing is there's no key objectives to the game. Once you get past the being able to unlock the terraforming feature, there's no key thing that you have to do. So players have full freedom to do whatever they want in the game. They can take part in any in-game activity. And the biggest key feature that makes Animal Crossing special, especially the first one, is that it utilises the calendar feature in the Nintendo devices. I think in the UK, in the US onwards. I might be wrong with that, though, don't quote me on it. But because these devices are built with a calendar in the system, the game uses this, so the game advances in real time. So it changes depending on the time of day or the time of year. So on a morning, it's different to on an afternoon or on a night. And your winter is different to your summer, which is different to your spring. And this also changes depending on what hemisphere you're in. So right now, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you'll get winter. If you're in southern hemisphere, you'll get summer. And these calendars also trigger special events on holidays like Halloween and Christmas Eve. And also different non-player characters can visit at different times of days. So Celeste, who we have here, who's a little owl, she only visits at nighttime. So the fact that the game changes daily and it only changes every day, it encourages players to return to the game every day. So it encourages daily gameplay. And not only this, but players are rewarded for playing every day. So they don't only just get a different game every day. They get extra points or unlocked rewards. And there's also negative effects if you don't log on to your game regularly. Your island reads, you get cockroaches in your house, and probably is what I think is the word, really upset and worried about you. So you have to check in with them or else they get sad. Take a quick stop on Animal Crossing. So returning back to the idea of inhabiting this space. So this daily gameplay, it encourages the creation of place because sorry, I'm just kicking the radiator. It encourages this creation of place because you get to know and understand the place in which the game is set more and more the more you explore it and the more you interact with it. Ingold calls this inhabitant knowledge. So he talks about the city. So when you first move to a new city, it's a place, it's like a space you don't know it very well, but through walking around it, commuting to and from work, going to the shops, you begin to be able to navigate things a lot better and be able to make your way around. Not only this, but you develop meaning to the surroundings. You have connections to them. You have memories connected to them. And this is something that you build up over time. This works as well on like video games. You make connections to the video game space. The more that you play it, the better that you become at it, the more enjoyable it is. And this works as well. I'll touch briefly on buttons and the actions. The more you can, and this is what Sean Moores calls the knowledge in the hands. So this is like the innate instinct of being able to navigate media devices. And this helps you be able to create better connections to video games. This inhabitant knowledge, we also have theories of at-homeness developed by David Seaman. So at-homeness is the taken for granted situation of being comfortable and familiar in the world that we live our day-to-day lives in. And specifically sort of talks about like the home space. And there's 5 key themes of this. So the first one is rootedness. So this is kind of like the bodily familiarity of the home. You know the way around the home, you know how to get from A to B. You usually know where most things are, although I'm always losing something. But typically I generally know where things are. And this takes time to build. This isn't something that's like innate. As soon as you move into a house, you know where everything is. This is something that builds up over time, much like the knowledge of the inhabitant knowledge. The second one is appropriation. So this is the sense of and control. So you might physically own your home, or you might just be there. You own the objects in your home; they're yours. But not only that, but you can control who enters your home, who enters your place, who enters your space. The same goes for this in video games. Animal Crossing, you can choose real life people, whether or not they come into or out of your island. You can pick and choose who enters. You can only share codes with certain people if you wanted to, similarly to like the home. The third theme is regeneration. So this is like the restorative powers of the home. It's a place to relax and a place for physical and psychological restoration. Some theorists do claim that it's a bit reductive to put to compare video games as just like a place of escape or a place of enjoyment or relaxation. But it is a huge reason why many of us play games, and myself included. I play it for fun. I play it to forget about the stresses of work. I play it to connect with my friends and just have some enjoyment. And the next one is at easeness. So the freedom of self, so the freedom to be yourself and manifest all sides of yourself without any negative repercussions. And it's very much like that in Animal Crossing, especially with all of the customization features. You can really be whoever you want to be, and you can build things however you want them. You can dress however you want. Your hair can be however you want, and nothing bad's going to happen because of that. And there's no negative repercussions. And the last feature is warmth. So this is like an atmosphere of friendliness, of welcoming and support. So knowing that you are comfortable and you're welcomed in this space. And a key feature of warmth is, being like regular use, regular return. A warm home or a warm room is not one that's never used or seldomly used. It's a room that people are in all the time. And this still encourages this like daily use, this daily, this regular connections to space. And yeah, so another key feature that David Seaman talks about in terms of at-homeness is dwelling. And this is a theory most commonly attributed to Heidegger. And he claims that, so a key part of at-homeness is dwelling. Dwelling involves living in and caring for a place and feeling a part of it, but not only for the place itself, but also its surrounding areas. However, Heidegger claimed that we are forgetting how to dwell. We don't know how to be at home and how to build homes. And people exist, but they no longer dwell. And a key thing with this is that Heidegger was writing this in the 1960s and the 1970s. And quite a lot's changed since then. Now we're probably, as a society, less likely to live in a familial home with parents until we're married. We're more likely to move out at a slightly younger age, potentially. But house prices are higher. It's harder to buy your own homes. Renting is more. Renting comes restrictions on how we can decorate our spaces, how we can customize them and make them our own. With renting come house shares, and that might mean that we have less control over who comes into our homes. I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely lived in house shares where my housemates' boyfriends have been in the house more than I have. So I definitely didn't have as much of a connection to that space as what he might have. So I don't think it's because we've forgotten how to dwell, it's just that we can't dwell in our homes. And instead of being able to dwell in our homes, we turn to different spaces instead, like video games. And Heidegger proposed that we learn to dwell in two different ways. One is by discovering importance of our own lives and also in other people's. And the second is to learn to design physical environments that sustain and enhance dwelling. Now, some people might argue that the video game isn't a physical space, but if we take you back to how we navigate through video games, well, we navigate through our fingers and thumbs, the digits of the hands. We navigate physically, even though we might not physically be in that environment, we are still interacting with it using our body. And this is what Sean Moores calls doubly digital, because not only is it a digital device, but we navigate it digitally with our fingers and thumbs. So we do interact with it physically. We also build on our islands in Animal Crossing. We build homes for ourselves and for our villages. We build areas. So on the screen at the moment is a screenshot of my island when I build a fairground. So we do build in-game environments, but also being part of a community. So being dwelling in other people's lives, not just our own. Animal Crossing and, well, games in generally have a huge online community, like all of the wonderful people here today. But specific games have an online community. So Animal Crossing really blew up over the pandemic because of people using it to connect with friends and family that they couldn't see, but also strangers online by sharing tips and tools and tricks and sharing furniture and different things to help make their island better and giving other people things to help make others' islands better. And this leads on quite nicely to my last point, which is this lovely quote by David Seaman, that the attachment to home is sometimes best revealed in out of the ordinary situations. What better out of the ordinary situation do we have than the global pandemic that we've all lived through and are all living through, where people were isolated from their friends and families and forced into the home. Not only did we turn to like different parts of media as comfort, but people specifically turned to video games. And the New York Times named Animal Crossing as the game of the pandemic due to how many people were buying Switches and Animal Crossing itself just to play, just to have some normality in their lives, some connections to others, and just to create this place at a time where we couldn't go to any of our other places, we couldn't connect with other people who we have these strong connections with. So yeah, it's not just me rabbiting on about a game that I love, it's thousands of people and their experience of creating place in this online space.